This is the ZTE Axon 7 Mini. Now sure, it looks a whole lot like the larger Axon 7, but after launching that flagship earlier this year, ZTE's shaved off a few millimeters here and there, swapped in some affordable new hardware, and transformed that handset into the much more mid-range aligned Axon 7 Mini. Does a new lower price tag make this an appealing alternative, or is this one case where bigger really is better? I'm Stephen Shank with PhoneArena, looking into those questions right now as part of my ZTE Axon 7 Mini review. Sometimes a mini smartphone is a scaled-down version of a flagship in terms of size only, packing all the features and processing power of the larger phone. Sometimes it's a lower-tier device, one that's wholly its own and only really using the flagship's name for some marketing muscle. And sometimes, as is the case with the Axon 7 Mini, we're dealing with a phone that tries to recreate the look and feel of a higher-end handset while offering some more budget-friendly hardware. Because compared to the Axon 7 Mini isn't really that mini. It's only a few millimeters shorter and a few less wide than the Axon 7, and it's just as thick as the bigger phone. At least it's appreciably lighter, to the tune of about 20 grams. The Axon 7 Mini keeps the same smoothly sloping aluminum frame as its namesake, with distinct front-facing speaker grills and a rear-mounted fingerprint scanner. And while it might feel even better if ZTE really did make the phone small enough to actually warrant that Mini name, this is still one handset that's very successful with its own ergonomics. ZTE gives the handset a headphone jack up top, USB Type-C on the bottom, your standard volume rocker and power button on its right edge, and a hybrid dual-SIM microSD tray on the left. Unlike the Axon 7 with its 5.5-inch Quad HD screen, the Axon 7 Mini packs a 5.2-inch 1080 by 1920 AMOLED panel. Don't let that resolution drop worry you though, as it still looks really nice, and while colors have that expected AMOLED oversaturation by default, ZTE does provide a number of adjustable settings to let you dial in a look that really works best for you. The bigger problem is brightness, which we measured as among the lowest of all phones we've evaluated so far this year. Indoors, things look fine, but output is low enough that you might be fighting with the sun on really bright days. In addition to that new screen, ZTE also took an axe to the Axon 7 Silicon when putting together the Axon 7 Mini, replacing the Snapdragon 820 chip with a 617. Right away, that puts this phone in a whole different class of handsets, and though we found performance to be plenty adequate for casual smartphone tasks, web browsing, Twitter, and the like, this chip just isn't up to the performance standards of more modern processors, and things like graphics-heavy games may stumble. Even a Snapdragon 625 would have made for a more compelling processor. RAM drops from 4GB to 3, but the sting there is much less acute, and we're not going to complain at all about the 32GB of internal storage here, which is all kinds of adequate, and the availability of support for microSD expansion gives users the option to push that limit higher and higher. While it's clear that ZTE made a number of sacrifices to keep costs down, one area where the manufacturer didn't skimp is the phone's speakers, and the front-facing stereo pair on the Axon 7 Mini delivers some really pleasing audio. That's helped further still with the optional Dolby Atmos enhancements, adding an extra layer of depth to the speaker's output. Even the included earbuds sound quite nice and have their own enhancement mode to improve audio quality, though at the expense of battery life. We might as well address the elephant in the room, because if there's one great failure of the Axon 7 Mini, it's that the largely reserved handset doesn't get to enjoy the benefits of stellar battery life. Instead, its 6 hours of screen on time is among the lowest we've tested in a while. And this is despite the presence of a seemingly decently sized 2705 mAh battery. Once again, we're wishing ZTE went with a different Snapdragon chip. As a small saving grace, battery recharge times aren't too shabby, with the Axon 7 Mini taking about 100 minutes to refill its tanks. The included charger is kinda neat too, and in addition to its cable being USB Type-C on one end, it's also got a reversible USB standard A connector on the other, not something you see every day. Another big downgrade for the Axon 7 Mini concerns ZTE's choice of camera hardware, and the 16-megapixel ISO sensor here drops niceties like optical stabilization and support for 4K video present on the Axon 7. At least front-facing resolution is unchanged, staying at 8 megapixels. Is the whole package still good enough though? Well, depending on your uses, maybe. Don't ask a lot from the camera and you should be happy with its performance. In well-lit, uncomplicated scenes, we got some solidly attractive photos out of the Axon 7 Mini. And even if lighting's a bit tricky, the camera software offers a powerful manual mode that allows shooters who know what they're doing to squeeze every last drop of performance out of the hardware here. But if you're more the point-and-shoot smartphone photographer, we found the Axon 7 Mini's automatic functions just a bit underwhelming, and especially its auto HDR mode. Even with the feature engaged, washed out exposures happen far too frequently. We also found the camera struggling with getting sharp focus at times, further leaving us dissatisfied with its performance. As we mentioned, video falls short of 4K, and 1080p is the highest resolution you'll be able to film in. But whether you record in 1080p or 720p, video never looks particularly sharp, and a lumbering autofocus makes switching between subjects more of a pain than it needs to be. Connectivity doesn't offer many surprises, though the dual SIM support is nice to have. Voice calls sound alright, but we did experience some digital interference that may have purists looking elsewhere. Luckily, our Axon 7 Mini review unit just got an update giving it VoLTE support, though we haven't been able to yet evaluate just how that may improve call quality. The Axon 7 Mini runs Android 6.0.1 Marshmallow, adorned with ZTE's own MiFavor 4 UI. MiFavor is a curious take on Android skinning, as it's at once lightweight and largely unobjectionable, while also making some bad decisions we just can't ignore. Those include a poorly conceived floating button that tries to offer some degree of edge gesture interface, but it's hard to use and just doesn't offer useful functionality, as well as a lock screen that makes it a pain to see your notifications. Now, both of those can be disabled or fixed by changing software settings, but that really speaks to the issues with MiFavor. There's a lot that you'll want to steer clear of or make sure is configured so as to minimize annoyance, but little you'll actively be seeking out as a real value add. Our disappointments continue with the phone's fingerprint scanner, and while the divot around it makes it easy to find, questionable scan accuracy had us struggling to unlock the handset. Multiple attempts quickly became the norm. Priced at $300 to the Axon 7's $400, the 7 Mini really feels like it makes too many sacrifices to justify those meager savings. But with discounts already arriving, pushing that $300 down to $250, the 7 Mini is starting to look a bit more appealing. It still has its battery annoyances, as well as a host of other quirks, sure, but it's still an ultimately solid, enjoyable to use phone. And if you find a good deal on it, this may be one mini smartphone worth picking up. I'm Stephen Shank with PhoneArena, thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe for even more mobile electronics videos.